Thank you very much, Amos. I would like to thank you, all of you, for this opportunity to discuss some of those great challenges that we face, some of the greatest that have ever been faced by the State of Israel. There are three main ones. These three that I wish to mention here: Iran, the Palestinian negotiations, and global economy. Vis-à-vis Iran, although there's an internal controversy in Iran about the actual allocation of resources, how much will remain within, how much goes out, but there's no controversy in the Iranian regime about that still Ayatollah Khamenei is still in control vis-à-vis the actual desire to reach a military nuclear bomb, and about the actual wiping off of Israel off the world map. And he says that from time to time. They all mention it, and very often outwardly as well as inwardly. And yes, Iran has reached two situations. On one hand, it promoted and has progressed with its nuclear program, but on the other hand, it has been absorbing more and more sanctions and suffering from them more and more. So on one hand, they managed to actually reach the fissionable actual material, and on the other hand, it is parking very close to nuclear power. There are three stations when you are creating that fission. Then there are three stations along the way when you are manufacturing it. First of all, enriched uranium to 3.5% to 20%, and then enriched uranium in one fell swoop to 90%. And that is the level of the enrichment that is necessary for ammunition, for arms. What they did is they diluted one of the stations. They moved that train from one station, but simultaneously they are improving the engine of that train so that they can break through without an interim station straight to the 90%. And the agreement that was achieved in Geneva is not a good agreement. It is a bad agreement. All in all, it has distanced Iran in perhaps by 6 weeks at the most from where it was beforehand. So therefore the test was and remains in the permanent agreement preventing them manufacturing and making nuclear weaponry. So there are all sorts of claims. I just heard him actually in Davos when he spoke. He said that people are objecting involvement in Syria. After all, they're actually thickly, they're all the way involved, and they're actually participating actively in the genocide, basically, the mass massacre. We're talking about most people are innocent, that they are executing day by day in Iran. And we're talking about people that are definitely innocent bystanders are just being executed. He talks about a free access to technology. And he said in Davos, while at the same time they are preventing that access to the internet day in, day out. And at the same time, they also said that they are not striving or not aspiring to actually attain nuclear for military use, while that is exactly what they're doing. They have invested $40 billion in their nuclear facilities and nuclear program, while 140 billion additional direct investment plus 140 billion on the price of the sanctions. In other words, $200 billion on nuclear energy for the sake of peace, for peace purposes. And don't forget that they are abundant in their natural resources, and the whole world knows it, and energy resources. Everyone knows that Iran wants and is aspiring to achieve that. That anything that will, that if we manage to actually dismantle them from their capability of achieving it, And I know that Amos said that you do not sleep at night, that it is keeping you awake, that the Iranian issue is thus doing. Well, believe me, you can sleep a little more calmly because it is keeping me awake all day, burning the midnight oil as well. And I can promise you that Iran will not, we will not enable them to actually create nuclear weapons, and that is what we have promised to ourselves. And now, of course, the threat is not only an unconventional weapon, but it is the conventional one that is concentrated on missiles that are brought to the Iranian enclaves around them in order to attack us from every side. We're talking, of course, through Gaza, and we are, and I don't want to expand on that other than to say that we want to ensure, that we want to promise that in our Palestinian the negotiations with the Palestinians, we will achieve two objectives. I do not want a two-state solution, sorry, a binational state. And I think that most of the majority of the citizens of Israel, but we also do not want another state, will start actually attacking us using terror against us. We want these two objectives to be achieved, and we will achieve them. We have undergone terrible shake-ups and turmoil after 5 years of responsibly navigating things in a considered manner. We will know very soon whether we can continue the negotiations with the Palestinians. The Americans are working in order to consolidate American positions and stances. And these are not Israeli ones, but these are American positions. Israel does not have to agree to everything that the Americans will present, but there are two basic pillars that we are going to stand on our hind legs and demand. First is the recognition of a Jewish state that will be the homeland of the Jewish people. Thank you very much. I want to explain why we stubbornly stand on that, because that is the heart, the core and the pith of the conflict that has been going on for 100 years. I have chosen, it was 1921, a year after my grandfather, rest in peace, arrived in Jaffa. That's when it started. He went to the Jewish Aliyah office, and in 1921, rioters, Arab Palestinians, attacked that station in Jaffa. The office, there weren't any settlers there weren't any settlements as we actually define them nowadays, but there was a basic resistance to any Jewish existence that slowly, gradually developed into real attacks. For example, the Hebron 1929 and the 1936 and 1939 struggle that continued till the War of Independence, and then 1967, and that was not on Judea, Samaria and the Gaza Strip. It wasn't the struggle one, but they were on, it wasn't over, it was against the actual existence of the Jewish state, against Zionism, any kind of Jewish existence or expression in that land. In other words, the fight and the struggle is not over the settlements, that struggle and the conflict. And by the way, we're not talking about a Palestinian state. After all, the Zionist movement agreed to recognize the Palestinian state during the partition plan, and it also agreed, various governments later on agreed to establish a Palestinian state, but that conflict has been ongoing because of one reason, and that is the objection, a stubborn objection to a recognition of a Jewish state, a Jewish homeland, to end and to curb all battles. And to accept the fact that there are two peoples here. When we're talking about an agreement, we're talking about an agreement wherein we are being demanded by the world and the Palestinians to establish a Palestinian national state. But can you imagine such a thing, that they will not be asked and they will not be demanded to then recognize a Jewish state? We've been living here in some kind of continuation for nearly up to 4,000 years. This is the land that with our national identity, this is our homeland. This is our state. This is where it is that we have re-established, and the Palestinians, they have to accept that. Otherwise, what we are being asked to do is to enable the establishment of a Palestinian state that will continue subversively acting against the existence of a Jewish state and turn us into refugees and to create territorial claims, national claims about this state. And we say that the solution is our two national states and nation states, and there will, with an agreement between them. In other words, there will be an equation that will be accepted by both, and therefore it is a steadfast, resilient demand. We want to end this conflict. In other words, not only the abolishment of the right of return, but a recognition unequivocally of this as a Jewish state and a national Jewish homeland. And that is the main pillar, the foundation, the cornerstone of that agreement with the Palestinians. And I'm sure you all know that during these 90 years, there is an ongoing, endless incitement and instigation against Israel and the Zionist movement, even before the inception of the State of Israel. And it has been ongoing not only in the Palestinian Authority, but also in the Hamas. The only difference is that the Hamas uses terror, and the Palestinian Authority, they don't use terror. It's very important, but the incitement and the non-acceptance of the State of Israel has been ongoing. We can see it in their textbooks, we can see it in the schools, we can see it in their media. I mean, we're talking about a media that is, of course, under the control of the Palestinian Authority. We see it in their temples, we see it in their mosques, and the Palestinian leadership talks about that inwardly as well. So alongside that demand, that I would say is a prerequisite, a sine qua non of that there should be a recognition of this Jewish state, we cannot promise that this recognition will really be deeply rooted and embedded in the Palestinian society, and therefore we need steadfast and very secure security issues, safety. We're talking about along the Jordan River and other security arrangements that are embedded in the hands of Israel, so that we will be able to secure ourselves and protect ourselves, the IDF and our security forces. So if I needed to succinctly summarize those two issues, I would go back to the Bar Ilan speech, and I would say that the best way and the easiest way to get at it is a Palestinian state that is demilitarized, that recognizes the Jewish state, a demilitarized Palestinian state that recognizes a Jewish state. We do not want to annex the Palestinians as citizens of the State of Israel. We do not want to control them, but as a derivative, the Palestinian state must be demilitarized. That means that certain signs of sovereignty should be restricted, and that is something that is crucial. And that is the real Middle East. That responsible, accountable framework for such an agreement. I'm not sure if that is actually going to come to fruition. One doesn't need two for this tango, you need at least three for this tango. I know that we are interested in continuing with this the negotiations and reaching agreement, and the Americans are also, they wish us to reach it as well. I cannot say at this moment whether the Palestinian leadership is ready to grapple and contend with the concessions that they will have to make. After all, they keep talking about the concessions that Israel will have to make, but we ought to think about those that they will have to make in order to reach some kind of agreement that will last and be sustainable and viable. Coexistence here in security and safety. And that soon.
I said that there's a third challenge, and that's the global economy. It's not just a challenge, it's also a great opportunity. We have seen two upheavals, a regional upheaval, which seems to occur here once in 100 years, and a global upheaval, not only in the global economy, in which Israel was the exception for the good as a result of its responsible fiscal policy, but there is a great opportunity here. We are in the age of knowledge, when there is an outburst of knowledge and information, and this impacts the global economy and is a huge opportunity for the State of Israel. Even as it is, we produce information technology at the highest per capita amount in the world, and our technological production is very great. And, for example, in the area of cyber, we produce about 50 times to the proportion of our size. That means that Israel is equivalent to a country of 400 million people, where its production of these products are involved. And this, alongside the openness of the global economy, this enabled us to get to markets that we would find it very difficult to get to without these two trends, globalization and
אם לא הייתה כלכלה גלובלית, והיית צריך לחדור לכל מדינה בנפרד, היית צריך להקים, נניח שארצות הברית, רק כדי להמחיש, נניח שארצות הברית לא הייתה ארצות הברית, אלא הייתה מורכבת מ50 מדינות לאום. כל אחת עם החוקים שלה, עם המיסוי שלה, עם הכללים שלה, והיינו צריכים לפתוח, החברות הישראליות היו צריכות לפתוח משרד בכל אחת מ50 המדינות הללו. אתם מבינים שלא היינו יכולים להתחרות. אבל העובדה שהכלכלה נפתחת ונעשית גלובלית, העובדה שיש לך כלכלת אינטרנט שהולכת ופורצת קדימה, נותנת למדינה כמו שלנו ולחברות הישראליות הזדמנות עצומה, ואנחנו אכן מממשים אותה. אני לא יודע כמה מכם הייתם בכנס הסייבר שקיימנו אתמול, פורץ דרך, 1,500 איש נכחו בה, כולל החברות המתקדמות ביותר בעולם בתחום הזה, והם לא באו הנה בגלל העיניים היפות שלנו, הם גם לא באו מתוך שיקול מדיני כזה או אחר, הם באו, כפי שהם אמרו לי, בגלל 3 סיבות. אותן 3 סיבות שאני פוגש כשאני מדבר עם מנהיגי סין, או מנהיגי מקסיקו, או מנהיגי מדינות אחרות, כפי שעשיתי בימים האחרונים, הם רוצים 3 דברים. טכנולוגיה ישראלית, טכנולוגיה ישראלית וטכנולוגיה ישראלית. והם יודעים מה הם רוצים. היתרון שלנו בתחום הזה נובע לדעתי מסיבות מיוחדות שיצרו כאן גביש של יכולות טכנולוגיות כבירות שאנחנו חייבים להמשיך לטפח אותן. הסיבות העיקריות הן קודם כל הצורך הצבאי שיצר את היכולות המיוחדות בצבא ובזרועות הביטחון, האוניברסיטאות המעולות שלנו, אני נמצא באחת מהן, במכוני המחקר, התרבות המיוחדת שלנו, שהיא קשורה בעובדה שאנחנו תמיד שואלים שאלות, אתה הזכרת שאלות, עמוס, אבל המסורת הזאת היא מסורת תלמודית שאף פעם לא תחמה את הידע, אף פעם לא שמה סימן קריאה, אלא כל הזמן חזרה וחקרה במרכזי ידע שונים, והדבר הזה, המסורת הזאת, פרצה החוצה אחר המהפכה הצרפתית או נפילת חומות הגטו לתחומים חדשים, לתחומי המדע, לתחומי המתמטיקה, לתחומי הפיזיקה והכימיה, והרי אנחנו רואים את התוצאות האלה באופן ברור. ובכן, התרבות שלנו, הנושא השלישי, והדבר הרביעי זה כמובן המקום הקטן שבו אנחנו נמצאים. כל אחד מכיר את כל אחד אחר, או לפחות מכירים אחד את השני, מתחרים אחד בשני, משתפים אחד את השני. הדבר הזה יוצר כאן מרכיב מיוחד, ואולי הסיבה העיקרית היא שאין לנו ברירה. כל מדינת ישראל היא תוצאה של יוזמה והכרה בעובדה שאנחנו חייבים לפעול בחדשנות מיוחדת על מנת לשרוד, על מנת להבטיח את חיינו. השילוב הזה יצר כאן גביש מיוחד שכמעט ואינו מצוי בשום מקום בעולם. הוא מצוי, בוודאי מצוי בארצות הברית, אבל אני בטוח שהוא מצוי באותה עוצמה או באותה יכולת סינרגטית, באותה יצירתיות במקומות רבים אחרים. העולם מזהה את זה. וזה נותן לנו הזדמנות גם לפתח את כל התחומים הרבים.
All the various areas of the new economy, in areas of life sciences and information industry and everything that connects them and many other areas. And it also gives us an opportunity to a large extent to change the face of the state of Israel, both towards the world, to create new alliances. I would like to emphasize that every state, every country needs alliances. And certainly a tiny country like ours needs alliances in order to multiply its strength. And these alliances are not only the political alliances, but they're also our relationships with the new superpowers that are arising and emerging on the international stage. And one day in Davos, 3 days ago, I spoke with Secretary of State Kerry, who represents the leading world superpower, the United States, and the foreign minister of China, and number 3 in Google. Those are superpowers. And Israel must generate a fabric of interests and partnerships with all of them. For example, in China. China is very interested in Israeli technology, to put it mildly. We can, if we can get a very small part of such a huge market, to a country of 8 million, that can be very helpful. And we have an opportunity, we have that opportunity. China must move a large proportion of its products to Western markets, especially in Europe, or including in Europe, and that merchandise must move physically to those places. 95% goes by sea, a large part through the Suez Canal, and now we are building a valve, a train that will connect the Red Sea and the Mediterranean and the port of Aqaba and Ashdod and Tel Aviv. This is first of all an economic connection between, a link between Asia and Europe and vice versa. And after that, only after that, will there be a passenger train that will enable you to travel from here, from Tel Aviv to Eilat in 2 hours. And that has huge implications for the vision that we want to realize and have wanted to realize since the days of Ben Gurion, to enable the connection of all of Israel, the Negev and the Galilee. What is the big question? We're such a small country, but we're stuck in that narrow corridor between Hadera and Gedera and Jerusalem, and now we're developing the state, and alongside the development of the world economy, and alongside the development of the huge world economy outside, we are developing our state. You drive on the roads, you see what's happening. It's part of our vision. It's a simple vision. It says that a highway from Kiryat Shmona to Eilat, and a train from Kiryat Shmona to Eilat, and a superhighway, an information superhighway of optical fibers from Eilat to Kiryat Shmona, that does away with the periphery. That is a term I don't agree with, both geographically and socially. We need to develop the whole country. This is an economic and social engine, and digital Israel is a social, economic, and global engine. The largest companies in the world, for example, like Cisco, are part of this effort, and as John Chambers, the head of Cisco in Israel, said Israel is advancing more quickly than any other country to realize that vision. And that is a test that's still ahead of us, and we are in a place where we can take advantage of our relative advantages in a way that we were unable to in the past ever. And this is expressed not only in the realization of opportunities. If there are two great engines that move the global economy, that is Asia, China, first of all, and the second is the Internet. And we are in both of those places. The Internet cannot grow without information security. It cannot grow without the ability to protect privacy. It cannot grow if we do not protect people's bank accounts, all the users. And it cannot grow if it is possible to harm these networks, and this can cause harm to states too, to the electrical grid, to the communications grid, to the transportation grid, and therefore we are putting a huge effort into the development of this capability as a separate capability that we're focused on, because we're changing the face of the Negev. What is happening now is that we're investing in Beersheba. We're putting our top units there, including the cyber headquarters that we have established, and this brings the biggest companies. You heard about IBM yesterday that decided to open a large development center in Beersheba at the heart of the campus, and that's where we built that center, because there is a combination of our security capabilities, academic capabilities, and business capabilities. And I've also made a decision to facilitate the manufacturing capability of Israeli cyber companies, of which there is a growing number. Some of them didn't even exist 4 years ago. And we are in a situation where we can turn Israel into a global technological superpower. And this is an ongoing effort, and it requires that we make changes in our education system, which has not yet closed the gaps as it needs to, but there are other systems that help us do that, and that's, for example, the IDF. I'd like to say something about the IDF, about the Israel Defense Forces. Everything that we imagine, all these great opportunities, alongside dealing with the dangers that lie in wait, and to prevent the danger of a nuclearized Iran and the terror, and on the other hand to assure a stable agreement with the Palestinians, all of this is dependent on the IDF. It's dependent on a number of other things, but first of all on the IDF. And the nucleus that leads the IDF is the professional army, which is being attacked irresponsibly. And I'd like to say that these people, the professional soldiers, we can say they do not rest. They guard Israel during the day and during the night, and there is nothing that that is the entire difference between us before the establishment of the State of Israel and now. And I think we should express that appreciation, especially in light of the criticism and contempt that I have heard recently. And I express that appreciation with great willingness, because I can tell you, as you described the conversations with me, I can tell you that my meetings and that I have held and the visits that I carry out among IDF soldiers, I know the extent to which the state and its citizens owe a debt to the IDF and to its professional soldiers in order to maintain the professional armies, in order to achieve the goals, which is distancing the threats on the one hand and advancing safe and secure peace. Alongside it, this requires a very, very strong army. I cannot imagine a situation where we will not be required to maintain a strong army, and all the other security institutions, the Mossad and the GSS, and also the unique cyber capabilities. All this requires a great deal of money, and this money will not come from contributions or gifts. It will only come from developing our economy, the economy of tomorrow. We are developing it in order to achieve our main goal, a Jewish state, and that means that it needs to prevent penetration or infiltration by tens of thousands of illegal aliens, and we did that. And A Jewish state, a democratic state, an advanced state. That is my vision, and I believe that we will be able to realize it. Thank you very much. Thank you.